Okay, I think in the interest of time, we can start. So I'd like to officially welcome everyone to this webinar. For those who don't know me, my name is Dana War. I am a training program assistant at African Population Health Research Center. And today we are graced by one of our top leaders who drive the capacity strengthening initiative in our organization in different forms. They'll be taking us through this course for today, and I'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves in depth. So before we proceed, I'll just want to remind you of a few issues. In case maybe you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. We'll be able to unmute you. Or you can also type your question on the Q&A section, and we'll take them after the training section. Remember that the recording of this meeting will be shared online on our website, together with the materials from the facilitators. So I want to hand over this to Dr. Flora Karimi. Please take it up.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Diana, it seems I cannot start my video because I'm not the host. So,
okay.
Or unless you're okay with me introducing myself without the video?
No. Let me change that. So
okay.
Okay, done. Are you able now?
Yes. Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, depending on where you come from. And it's our pleasure to be able to take us through this course on research management and leadership. This is a course that would usually take us 1 week to run. But considering the fact that we only have 2 hours to maybe have an overview given, we will really focus on high-level kind of discussions and presentations in this meeting. Some of you may wonder why we are not delving too deep, but it's because the time may not be enough for us to delve deep enough in this course. And secondly, because we have a diverse team of participants at different levels. There are those who are undergraduates, there are those who are postgraduates, there are those who have just finished their first degree, and there are those who have done their PhDs, and early career researchers are also in this particular team. We also have some senior researchers in the team. So in order for us to be able to balance all these divergent groups, we will focus on just giving us some high-level, general kind of understanding of what research management and leadership is all about. But beyond that, as Diana mentioned, we will also give you quite a number of handouts or materials that we believe that you will be able to look at, and you will be able to respond to at least 2 assignments that have to do with research management and leadership, and which will improve your understanding of what it all entails. So having said that, I'll start by introducing myself, and later on my colleague, when he begins his session, will also introduce himself. My name is Dr. Flora Karimi. I am the head of research and related capacity strengthening at APHRC. That's the African Population and Health Research Center. So I'll go straight to my presentation. I will do part 1 of the presentation, which will really touch on trying to give us an overview of what research governance, leadership, and management is all about. And thereafter, my colleague, Professor Hesbon Wau, will come on board and talk about other aspects. So let me share my screen for now. And you'll allow me to put off my camera now. Okay. Okay, I'll stop my video so that we do not suffer in terms of internet connectivity. So I'm focusing on just giving us an overview of what research management and leadership is all about. And I'll focus on 5 main areas. I'll talk about research governance, research management, research leadership, supervision, mentorship, and coaching. I'll just touch that area, not talk too much about it, but some of the articles that we have shared with you will cover that aspect. And I'll also touch briefly on effective communication. And thereafter, I will hand over the next session to my colleague. We encourage you to make use of the chat box for any questions that you have. However, we will be able to respond to the questions after the 2 presentations are made. So going on to governance, and I'll just look at the definition of what organizational governance is all about. Even as we start talking about research governance, we need an understanding of what organizational governance covers. And in a nutshell, we are talking about those processes. They may include processes, systems, structures, rights, duties, or even obligations by which organizations are directed, controlled, and held accountable. So keywords when you think of governance include, sorry for that, include direction. That's one word that you'll hear when you're discussing governance aspects. Direction. What direction are we going? You've heard of strategic directions or strategies. When you talk of strategies, you're actually referring to governance-related aspects. Control is another word that you will hear severally. Power and accountability. Those are key aspects when we talk about any governance structure or organizational governance as a whole. Now, even as we think of governance as a whole, we look at governance in different perspectives. There's a perspective that touches on the legislative aspects. What are the rules for participation? We can also look at governance in terms of judiciary aspects, thinking of how do we audit performance? How do we check for compliance with the rules? There's the other arm that is executive governance. And I'm sure if you have been in many of the governance kind of organs, you will always hear them talking about the 3 arms of government, or even the 3 arms of governance. And this will be legislative, it will be judiciary, and it will also be executive. So when we touch on executive governance, we are really looking at the operational aspects. What is it that we have put in place to facilitate the management of the operating rules to such an extent that we get to meet the goals that have been set out? And the last aspect that you will also hear of when you're talking about governance is that of the structural aspect. You may have heard the word organizational structures being referred to. Some people would refer to organogram. This really speaks on the classification of different individuals or offices according to the roles that are played. And this is where you see a lot of relationships reflected, or even hierarchical kind of structures, whereby reporting lines are also considered. So those are the perspectives that we consider when we are referring to governance, governance as a whole. Now, going on to research governance, we can talk about so many other kind of governance, but for purposes of this webinar, we will focus on research governance. And in research governance, we are looking at those processes that are used by institutions to ensure that they are accountable for the research conducted under their auspices. And to be able to look at this, there are particular conditions under which research needs to be carried out. Remember what I mentioned in my first slide, that there are particular keywords. You cannot miss out on the word accountability. And that's one of the words that you can see in this particular slide. So when you're looking at governance as a whole, we look at aspects that touch on the establishment of ethical principles. What are the ethical principles that need to be there when carrying out research? We look at guidelines for responsible research conduct. What are these guidelines that are required? What are the legislative aspects? What are the regulatory kind of aspects that are relevant to the research that you're carrying out and that are relevant to the location or area that you are focusing on? You will realize that when you're carrying out any research, you cannot apply the law of Kenya, for example, in research to what may be happening in Uganda or in Senegal. Each land has their own regulatory aspects and also legislation. And so it is key that whenever we're carrying out any research work, we know that we are accountable to the different institutions or bodies that are in charge of research within your area of focus. And that is why whenever it comes to seeking approvals to research are sought based on the land that you're dealing with, based on the Kenya law, or based on the Ugandan law, or based on the South African law, and what they have within their acts that touch on research and their related regulations. And the other aspect that you have to think of is the institutional policies. So when you're thinking of the processes as a whole and thinking of how to account for our research work, we need to be aware that we must carry out our research in accordance to these aspects. The second aspect is that of finding out what are those systems of administration and supervision that are necessary in carrying out your research. And some of them would include how do you manage your research as a whole? How is the research managed? What systems have you put in place to manage your research? What systems have you put in place to be able to protect the participants or even to protect the staff members, the research assistants who you are having with you? And what systems have you put in place to assure that you're accounting well for the research that is being carried out? The third aspect is that of setting standards for research conduct, defining the responsibilities of those involved, and also being able to determine how you will improve research quality and safeguard the public as a whole. And this is carried out through considering how you can enhance ethical awareness and scientific quality. So how do you ensure that everyone who's around you is aware of these are the ethical standards that are required? These are the scientific quality aspects that need to be considered. A second level is that of promoting good, responsible conduct. So even as you carry out research, you have to work and practice good conduct. And the third aspect is that of constantly asking yourself, how do we ensure that we reduce adverse events? How do you mitigate against risks that come in the process of research management? And what lessons do you learn from these adverse events that can be able to help you as you go on with your research work, but also as you come up with other research proposals? And the fourth aspect is that of how do you prevent research misconduct? And research misconduct goes closely hand in hand with thinking of ethical aspects that you are dealing with in the project. How do you also prevent poor performance? We have to distinguish between research misconduct and poor performance. And so it is necessary that whenever you're thinking of research governance, that you also draw a framework that covers the different governance aspects that we have talked of in the previous slide. So when you're thinking of the research governance framework, we are really thinking of a framework that sets out the standards that need to be followed and responsibilities of good research practice. And this is necessary to come up with that framework so that you can be able to promote good practices in research, so that you can be able to monitor practice and performance throughout the research process, so that you can be able to ensure that scientific and ethical quality is enhanced and upheld, so that you can be able to minimize risks in research. Another reason why you need such a framework is so that you can safeguard the participants in research. And the participants don't only have to be human participants. It could also be animals or even other organs that we can think of. And the last aspect that you also need to consider, and the reason why you need to have a framework, is so that you can be able to protect your research team by providing them with clear guidance or clear guidelines for the conduct of research, so that if they are aware of what is expected of them, then they can be guided on how they should be able to carry out their research work in a way that protects them. So let me touch on research management. As I mentioned, I won't be able to go into details during this particular webinar, but I will give highlights of what is expected for us to start thinking of what research governance and management is all about, and try and go through articles and reviews that can be able to deepen our understanding of research management. So let's look at research management as a whole. Research management really refers to all administrative and operational functions that you deal with as a researcher or the research team in a way that helps you to manage the research that is going on. So we may not be talking about the research work per se. We are really talking about what facilitates the research work to be carried out in a way that is effective and efficient. And so when we are thinking of research management, we embrace all that the institution can do to maximize and impact on the research activities that are going on in the institution. And this may not just be the institution, but all that you as a researcher or a research team can do to maximize the effectiveness, efficiency, and the impact of the research that you're carrying out. And aspects that you can consider when you're thinking of research management touch on what assistance do you need? I'm just going to go some of the areas. I'm going to go through some of the areas. What are these aspects or assistance that you need to be able to identify new sources of funding? Might you need some administrative support in that area? What assistance do you need in presenting research applications, or even advising on the costs that is necessary for a research project? As a researcher, you may not be too conversant with financial aspects. And so having someone who is conversant or who is proficient in finance aspects would be beneficial in helping you cost your research work. So that's what we are referring to. How do you negotiate contracts That's part of research management. Again, as a researcher, this may not be a proficiency that you may be having, but yet you could have members of your team or even members of the institution come on board to assist you when you're negotiating different contracts. This may be contracts with the funder and looking at all the legal clauses that exist. This may be contracts that you need to negotiate with also your sub-grantees. There are those who may be benefiting from your research work in one way or another, or you may be having partners, or you may have brought in resource individuals. So how do you negotiate your relationship with these individuals who are involved in the research work in a way that puts you in a comfortable place when it comes to the regulations and also the legislations? So to do that, you might need individuals who have legal minds or who are conversant with compliance issues. On aspects of project and grant management, as I mentioned before, as a researcher, you may be having an awareness of the science that is involved, but you may be weak in terms of how do I carry the day-to-day activities of this grant? How do I report? How do I execute it? And for that, you may need additional support in that area. Another area is financial control systems, being able to control the various financial systems that you have in place, ensuring that you are within the expectations of that particular project. The other area that you may need administrative support or operational support in is the area of dissemination of research results, or even their commercialization, or even the knowledge exchange that is required in a way that is cognizant of how to communicate scientific matters to the common public. So you may be having terms that you have used in your research work, but yet the research work that you have carried out is to benefit a community. How do you break up that information in a way that the community is not looking at the scientific aspect of what you're telling them, because they may not even understand it, but in a way that you are able to communicate those science aspects to the local community or to policy actors, so that then there's uptake and so that they can be able to receive it in a better way. You may also need policies in place, institutional policies in place that will be able to help you, especially when you have to manage research misconduct. How do you deal with research misconduct? How do you deal with the mitigations against research misconduct? What compliance aspects do you need to consider? So I just want to touch on some of the structures that are needed when you are optimizing research management aspects. I know I may seem like I'm repeating some of these aspects, but I am just trying to emphasize the fact that research management has to be carried out in a particular way. So you need to have institutional policies and procedures in place, institutional policies and procedures that cover publications, that cover proposal development, that cover ethical reviews, and that cover integrity aspects. When you're talking about integrity aspects, you're looking at aspects that touch on whistleblowing, for example. Conflict of interest. How do you deal with conflict of interest? How do you encourage individuals to speak in a place where they are protected in terms of whistleblowing? How do you safeguard different aspects within your organization? How do you protect yourself against fraud or even bribery? Do you have policies and procedures that govern that? Do you have supportive systems in place? Supportive systems include systems that give opportunities for one to be able to search and search for opportunities for funding, or even opportunities to express themselves in an intellectual manner. Do you have supportive systems that help in terms of grant writing and management? This is usually a very hard area. Writing a proposal is not easy. And so are there systems in place that support that? Let me just think of what is in APHRC, for example, the African Population and Health Research Center. We have a whole unit that focuses on looking out for grant opportunities. And that will support in understanding what the grant requirements or a call's requirements are, so that whoever it is who's coming up with a proposal is supported. In your organizations, do you have such support systems in place, whereby someone who wants to come up with a project is aware of the fact that there are these funders who we can approach, there's this pool of partners who we can approach to collaborate, and so they are aware of how to handle the grant writing process or even the grant management process as a whole? What supportive systems do you have in terms of compliance? Are you aware of all the legislative, regulatory, or even guidelines and codes of practice that appertain to the research that you're supposed to be carrying out? And what support systems can you have in place in an institution in a way that they help you be able to have on your radar compliance, in a way that if there's any defiance or even any lack of compliance, then they will raise that red flag? What support systems do you have in that area? What support systems do you have in the legal aspect? I had talked about this earlier on. What support systems do you have to help you when you're dealing with financial management and risk management? What support systems do you have when dealing with partnership management? Again, this is usually quite a difficult aspect. You're bringing on board different partners to collaborate with, yet you want to ensure that there is equity in terms of the partnership relationship. How do you manage that partnership in a way that no one feels that they have been excluded, no one feels that they have been unfairly treated, no one feels that they have not been consulted or they have been disrespected, and in a way that you have the different partners trust each other and trust the process? And what system do you have in terms of reporting? Is there a way that you get flagged by your internal systems when a reporting period is close? How do you deal with the reporting period as a whole? A third aspect that will help in optimizing research management is that of having supportive offices. One can say that the research team on their own is sufficient enough to be able to manage a research project. However, because the research team may be so engrossed in carrying out the research activities, there's need for not just the policies, not just the systems, but also having offices in place that will support this. And earlier on, I did refer to having maybe a research management or business development office. I'm sure some of your institutions have this. And for those who don't have such offices, it's good for you to start thinking of how can we encourage our institution to have those offices in place, so that then they can be able to support the system and so that they can be able to support the compliance to the policies and procedures in place. So do you have an office that supports you, or even a committee that supports you when it comes to carrying out ethical reviews? You might think of having an institutional review board in place, or you may think of an office that is the extension, or it's a link to the external or scientific review committees that are there. I mentioned about fundraising and grant management. You may have an office that really focuses on the identification of calls that relate to your area, the management of the application process, the fundraising process, and finally, the reporting process. Might you need such an office? Is it something that you can be able to consider moving forward? Do you need an office that negotiates contracts? And I think we referred to this before. Do you need an office that really manages the project? Do you need an office that has that deals with the financial management of this particular project? As I mentioned, not all of us are well conversant with the financial management aspects. So is there an office that is helping you there? Do you have a finance officer who can be able to help you there? Have you invested in having policy engagement officers in place who can be able to help you upscale or even share your findings beyond where you are? I'll go on and talk about ethical and compliance in research, because those are terms that we have referred to over and over again. So when we're thinking of ethics, we are really thinking of the moral principles. I have highlighted the word moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conduct of an activity. And we're really thinking of what is good for the individual and the society. When you're talking about moral aspects, those are the questions you ask. That's a question that you ask yourself. What is good for the individuals I'm dealing with? What is good for the society that I am dealing with? On the other hand, when we're referring to compliance, we are referring to that act or the process of ensuring that we obey or that we conform to standards and regulations that promote the moral principles that are necessary or that govern the behavior or the conduct of an activity. So thinking of compliance, we look at different aspects of compliance. There's compliance to regulations. There's compliance to policies. There's compliance to processes. Again, I've mentioned this earlier on. If you don't remember anything else, please remember the word regulation, processes, systems, policies, and standards. There's guidelines, compliance to guidelines. What guidelines are there? Are we aware of the guidelines? You know, there's something that we continuously refer to when it comes to, and I'll talk of the government of Kenya because I live in Kenya, where there are quite a number of laws that may be touching on one specific aspect. Let me refer to research, for example. There may be quite a number of laws that appertain to research. Now, if you're not aware or if you're not keen on finding out what these laws are, you'll find yourself breaking them. So having someone at the middle of compliance who's able to go through the different laws, or you as an individual, as a researcher, being able to go through the different laws and regulations and policies that exist at the continental level, at the national level, or even at the institutional level will be required so that then you can become compliant. And I've mentioned about the different laws that exist. So a question to all of us, because we are from diverse areas, is, I don't know that you can see my screen, I hope so. Are you aware of the laws that govern the research carried out in your area? You might be coming from Nigeria, or you might be a Kenyan researcher who's carrying out a research in collaboration with someone who's from Nigeria. Are you aware of the laws, the regulations, the policies, the processes, the guidelines that govern the research work that's been done in that area? And secondly, Are you aware of those external bodies that exist and that you need to continuously refer to be able to give you authority to be able to carry a particular kind of research? Is it at the institutional level? Is it at the national level? In some cases, you'll find that there might also be external bodies at the county or state levels in countries that deal with counties or states, or even in different departments. You may find that you're carrying out a research that touches on gender, for example, and you might be thinking this research that touches on gender is focused on maybe a ministry that is in charge of gender. But yet, because it touches on an area like higher education, then you might also have to find out what are the laws that appertain to higher education in terms of research. I'm just trying to paint a picture for us. In the same way, we are talking about mental health in this case. What are the different components of mental health and areas that we may need to consider even as we think of the laws? Do we need to go to the Ministry of Health, for example? Do we need to go to the Ministry of Education if you're touching on on schools, and mental health that touches on secondary level children? So who do you need to go to? So you as an individual have to go that extra mile and be responsible enough to find out what governs the research and what are the external bodies that you need to be in touch with. I'll touch on good research practices and point out that when you're dealing with good research practices, we look at 4 different areas. The first one is that of honesty. We expect you to be honest in your presentation of your research goals and the intentions and findings. We expect you to be honest in terms of how you report your research methods, and procedures. We expect you to be honest in how you gather your data, how you use and acknowledge the work of other researchers. That touches on plagiarism. We need you to be honest in terms of how you convey your valid interpretations without leaving some information. I've encountered researchers or individuals who have gone out to carry out research, and because some research work did not favor, or the findings did not favor what they thought would be the direction, then they leave out, the discussions or even the interpretation that touches on aspects that they felt did not favor their direction. So we are called upon to be objective in all ways, not to be subjective, and to be able to convey whatever results they were, whether they are positive or negative or adverse results. We need to be honest in terms of our justification of our findings as a whole. Secondly, we need to exercise rigor in coming up with our methodologies, or the appropriate methodology that we need to use. Because research is, let me call it, complex in its ways. We have to find out what is appropriate for whatever research design that we have. And so that will call for us to be rigorous in how we approach our justification on the different approaches that we are going to use, on the kind of analysis that we are going to come up with. And therefore, it is necessary that we come up with a protocol that we adhere to continuously. We need to be rigorous in terms of how we draw interpretations and conclusions. We have to look at the comprehensive picture of what we are doing. We have to be rigorous in terms of communicating our results. Earlier on, I referred to the scientific communication or science communication. Who is it who you can bring on board so that then they can help you to communicate your results, not just to the scientific community, but also to the general public, or even to the policy actors. We need to be transparent. These are good research practices. We need to be transparent and also open in terms of communication. How do we communicate conflict of interest? How do we communicate the results that we have, or even the methodology that we are using? How do we communicate our analysis and the interpretation of our data? How do we communicate our findings as a whole? I mentioned earlier on, whether they are negative or positive, how do we communicate that? How do we communicate to our subjects, those or our respondents, what we are really doing, while we also seek disclosure in the whole process? And the fourth aspect is the need for us to care and respect for all participants all the participants and subjects in the research work. This may include, and I mentioned before, it may include human beings, it may include animals, it may include environment, it may also include cultural aspects of our research work. So how do we care and respect for these aspects? How do we become good stewards of the research and scholarship aspect so that in the future, we are not jeopardizing what will be done in the future? We are not jeopardizing the environments, even through what we have done during the research work, and in a way that we can be able to make use of these particular areas where we are doing research because we have not destroyed them. I'll give an example of chemical reactions, for example. We may carry out a research that touches on different kind of chemicals, let me call them chemicals, or adverse kind of detergents. How do we dispose of them? And what effect does that have on the environment? I've just given that as an example. Or even, we may decide to carry out a research that may be touching on human beings. And it may also engage, it may also involve using particular maybe substance or injections with specific substances. How does that affect us? What is the ethical consideration that we need to make when considering such studies? So I'm just throwing it there so that we could think further. What is the importance of us having the good research practices? One of the reasons why we need to have good research practices is because good research practice has a direct impact on the quality of research that we produce and on its value to those who we might be using it for. And therefore, it may also help us have greater impact. Good research practices also help us in terms of enhancing research excellence. There is a direct relationship between research excellence and excellence in our research practices and processes. Good research practices also help us in terms of, or they contribute to the reputation of both the researcher and the research institution. If you carry out your research work in an excellent way, that speaks into your reputation, your public reputation. And so it is necessary that you retain your reputation through the way you carry out your research. Again, it contributes to public trust. If your research practices are good, then even the public will trust your research work. The public will also trust the fact that you are protective of the participants or even what you are dealing with within the research environment. I've been in cases whereby policies are being made with respect to different aspects, and they ignore the voice of the researchers. And you'll hear many policy actors saying, no, we don't trust the outputs of researchers. Could it be that the reputation of researchers and research institutions have gone down? Could it be that our results of the findings that we have had in one way or another have led to negative aspects within the community in a way that we have lost that public trust? And how do we gain it back? We have to go back to good research practices. And good research practices also help us to ensure that the best possible value is being obtained for the funding that we have received. For funders, they are so keen to ensure that there's value for the funding that they have given to us. Are you able to keep the reputation even with the funders that you are dealing with? So when thinking of good research conduct, we think of how do we maintain the highest standards of rigor and integrity. I think I've referred to the rigor. I've also referred to the integrity levels at all stages of your research, all the way from how you conceptualized your research work to the methodology, to the execution of the different methods, and to the sharing of your findings, and later on to how you store the data that you have obtained and how you get rid of it and after what period of time. Many times you find that there are times when you find that research has been carried out in a very good way. We have the data available, but the researcher went on and exposed information or shared information out that should not have been shared with others. So how do we protect the integrity of the research work that we have? Research should be conducted according to appropriate ethical, and I've mentioned this before, legal and professional frameworks, obligations, or even standards. We need to use transparent, robust, and fair processes for dealing with allegations of research misconduct. So when you hear there's a research misconduct, how do you deal with that? Do you push it under the carpet, or how do you deal with that even moving forward? And when we are talking about research misconduct, we are talking about that behavior or actions that fall short of the standards of ethics. Remember, ethics deal with moral principles, or even they fall short in terms of the research and scholarship requirements, and that fail to ensure integrity of research work, that the integrity of the research work has been upheld. So misconduct comes with a high price. And as I mentioned before, if we have misconduct, then this results in a breach of trust that allows scientists to build on others' work. If I discover that there's a researcher X who has had research misconduct, the possibility of me wanting to work with that individual moving forward may be reduced. So you also affect yourself as a professional in the sense that even scientists may not be able to trust you. But secondly, those you are carrying the research to help or to facilitate in terms of impact may not trust you at all. And I spoke into this earlier on. So decisions may be made that ignore the fact that you have carried out research because you're not trusted as a researcher. So we need to ensure that trust is at the forefront in all that we do. And that means that we need to take care that we always have good conduct taking place. Some of the examples of misconduct, research misconduct, include plagiarism, whereby you have not credited what you have to the appropriate individual. Falsification of information, or even manipulation of information. Fabrication of information, coming up with data from your desk, yet you should have picked it up from a research center. Deception in one way or another. Conflict of interest, failing to declare your interests in a particular area. Omitting authorships and acknowledgements. You may decide, yes, I've carried out this work and I had a team with me, and at the end of it, you omit some of the names, or you fail to acknowledge who the funders of this particular project were, or even to acknowledge the institutions that supported you in one way or another. And the last aspect, and you can add many other aspects, these are just examples, is that of carrying out studies that have been unapproved or disapproved, or studies that never underwent ethical approval. And so when you have research misconduct, this does not include errors of judgment. Maybe you carried out a research and your team judged something in a way that was an erroneous manner, or even when they were selecting, the team was selecting or analyzing the data that they have received, there was an error in that area, or there was a difference in opinions that involved the interpretations on data, or even misconduct that is not related to the research process. So these aspects cannot be considered as research misconduct. Research misconduct really touches on ethical aspects. It touches on the process. Let me just call it, it is deceptive. It is deceptive in the way you consider it. So how do we mitigate against research misconduct? One way that we can do that is to enhance the knowledge of scientific traditions and sound scientific practices within your institutions. Enhance knowledge within the different researchers in terms of how do you come up with publications? How do you get your authorship cleared out? How can you carry out peer review processes? How do you manage data? How do you supervise data? How do you ensure research integrity and ethics are followed out? So bringing up that knowledge, enhancing the daily engagement in scientific practices. Another area is that of, so assuming that you have daily or in a regular manner, you've been engaging in scientific practices, sound scientific practices as an institution. Incorporate review processes. Incorporate ways in which individuals will be encouraged to uphold good research practices. This could be through a peer review process. It could even be through a reward process, whereby when one does not do well in terms of research work, then there's a negative reward given. But even when someone has done well in terms of following the different practices, there's a way of acknowledging them or even recognizing their efforts. Then penalize. Don't just take for granted any misconduct. Penalize those who have been involved in different misconduct. Have an internal system, mechanism in which misconduct, research misconduct is penalized or handled, and also have an external mechanism in place that would cover you when it comes to the legislations and regulations that affect misconduct. And finally, encourage your researchers to be involved in scientific societies or even scientific journals. This will somehow rub on researchers in a way that because of that peer-to-peer kind of learning or peer or researcher to mentor kind of learning, then they are encouraged to walk the right path when it comes to research. Some of the roles that we need to consider, I know some of us may be from institutions and you may be sitting in some of those institutional offices that touch on research. We need to ensure that in institutions, we have maintained a research environment and framework. Remember, I referred to the framework earlier on, that develops a good research practice within the institution and that nurtures a culture of research integrity. Again, we need to clearly spell out those policies that are required on ethical approval or any other aspect of good research practice to all researchers. We need to guide the different researchers that we have, even as institutions. Guide them on what are the policies that exist, what are the procedures that exist, who is responsible. Have this in a common area where different researchers can be able to go in and be able to get information on how they should be able to apply different research practices. Give support to your researchers. Make them understand what are the values. Give them opportunities to be in different committees. Also consider having appropriate arrangements that can be able to support your researchers in one way or another. Do you have, in our institutions, I want to just refer to something that we have created in APHRC, which is the Journal Club. It's a way in which we bring different individuals together to be able to discuss different journal articles. And through that, we are actually giving the researchers an opportunity to know how to deal with different legal or ethical or professional requirements and standards, while also helping them to be more critical in terms of their engagements when it comes to research work. And monitor as an institution the implementation of various research and related policies and procedures. So in a nutshell, when it comes to the institutional responsibilities, what we are actually saying is that as an institution, have clear practices, policies, and procedures that support the researchers. Have and give opportunities for your researchers to learn, to be trained, and to be mentored in different ways. Have robust management and monitoring systems in place that will be able to assist you to ensure that the researchers are rigorous in what they are doing, that they are of high integrity levels, that they are honest in all that they do. And look for systems that will continuously help the researchers keep those high standards. Remember, we are talking about research leadership in all that. I'll touch shortly on leadership aspects. When you're talking about managing of research management, there's always the aspect of leadership that we cannot fail to consider. And leadership is really the ability of an individual to influence, motivate, and enable others to contribute towards the effectiveness and success of an organization or research, setting the necessary rules for others, and leading from the front. And I'll emphasize, leading from the front. They also have attitudes that influence the environment around them. And I'm placing this so that you can be able to look at what I've just put in. As leaders, you're not bosses sitting on your seats and driving the workers. No. You work with them, you coach, you have a goodwill. You are not, you do not depend on your authority, the authority that you sit on. You don't inspire through fear, but you lead and inspire in enthusiasm. It is not about my success. No, it's about what is a team going to gain? How am I affecting others in this team? It's not about fixing the blame on others when aspects of your research or the process breaks down. No. It's a matter of coming in and finding out, how do I work with all those I'm working with to sort out what has happened? So in leadership, and I'll quickly go through these slides that talk about research leadership. When we are thinking of research leadership, we are really thinking of 4 main domains. We are thinking of knowledge aspects. We are thinking of personal qualities that we have to have, organizational aspects. And we're also thinking of how do we influence and impact. Leadership is about influence. It's about impacting. What kind of a leader are you? So in terms of research, thinking of the knowledge and intellectual abilities that we have to consider. We look at knowledge base. What is the knowledge base that you have? What is the cognitive abilities that you operate in? And how creative are you? We have put for you a particular link that you can be able to go to be able to read more about the whole aspect of research leadership. And so what I'm presenting are just some of the highlights that you will receive from this particular, it was a study that was carried out and one that led to a framework on research leadership being developed. In the area of personal, the second domain, on personal effectiveness, we refer to the personal qualities and approaches that need to help you to be an effective researcher. And this touch on your personal qualities. It touches on your self-management. How do you manage yourself? And how do you grow, or how do you develop yourself professionally and career-wise? The third domain is that of research governance and organization. What knowledge do you have of the standards, requirements, and the professionalism that is needed to carry out research? And I have referred to this in the past. And so we are asking ourselves, as a research leader, what professional conduct is required? What research management capabilities do you have? How do you manage resources? This includes finances, funding, and other resources, including human resources. And the last aspect of the research leadership aspect is that of engagement and influence for impact. This is where we refer to the knowledge that a researcher has and the skills that they have to work with others and to ensure that there's wider impact of research. And so the question we should ask ourselves as research leaders, or individuals who aspire to be research leaders, is how do we work with others? How do we communicate and disseminate information? How do we engage the wider public for greater impact? And so this might be a bit messy, but you could look at it. It's more of the attributes and competencies that a research leader needs to be able to meet the domains that we have talked about. And these attributes can be distributed in a breadth manner or even in a depth manner. So when you're talking of the breadth, in terms of breadth, we are really referring to relational aspects that touch on personal qualities, but also relational aspects that touch on how do you relate with people and communities. So when it comes to personal qualities, and I referred to this earlier on, we're talking about reputation and esteem. Do you have a reputation as a research leader? What is your self-esteem looking like? Do you reflect as an individual? Do you take responsibility? How enthusiastic are you? When you're relating with people and the community at large, do you influence? What kind of a leader are you? How do you manage people? How do you work with your team? How do you mentor? Or do you mentor anyone? How do you engage with the public? How do you bring out policy aspects for greater impact? While on the depth aspect, we are thinking of your subject knowledge, and we referred to that in the first domain. How do you evaluate your success and assess what is happening around you? How do you plan for your project? What do you prioritize? How do you deal with income? How do you fundraise? How do you deal with resources around you? Do you publish? And how are you doing in the area of publications? So quickly, I will touch on supervision, mentorship, and coaching. I will not go into depth in the interest of time, but I'll refer to supervision, mentorship, and coaching. These are three terms that many researchers or individuals as a whole would confuse. But they are interrelated, but yet they could also be considered separately. A supervisor could also be a mentor and could also be a coach. But a supervisor could also stand on that particular responsibility of just supervision. So when you're thinking of supervision, we're really thinking of a formal way of supporting a junior staff in an assignment. And so the junior staff really reports to the supervisor, and they are guided in different processes. While when we're talking about mentorship, this at times can be an informal kind of support, a relational kind of support that is provided by a senior individual or an expert in a field to a mentee, someone who wants to grow in a particular area. While supervisors at times cannot be chosen, you can choose your mentor. And a mentor can choose to have a particular mentee. And so the mentor works with this individual, not necessarily in a formal manner, but in a way to help them get to understand themselves and grow into the person they want to be. The third aspect of coaching sounds very similar to mentorship, but I will be able to bring up some aspects that distinguish coaching from mentorship. So when you're thinking of mentorship, we think of it in terms of mentoring resulting in effectiveness in transfer of skills and knowledge. We also think of it as a long term. You can have a mentor for quite a long period of time. The mentor also becomes a role model. The mentorship is all about a human relationship that is being built. The mentorship aspect also provides the mentee with an opportunity to think about their life options. Remember, it is long term. So the mentor will present to the mentee an idea or a perspective that will help them be able to think of their long-term or their life options and progress. Remember, it is not directive. It's not a directive. Unlike supervision that can be a directive being given down, mentorship is different. And with mentorship, the mentor supports and encourages individuals to manage their own life. That's why I mentioned it's not directive, and to reach their potentials. And to develop their skills while also thinking of how to improve their performance and become the person they want to be. Remember, supervision, mentorship, and coaching all lead to the improvement of an individual, but using different strategies. When you're thinking of coaching, yes, the coach will empower individuals to realize their own goals. They will also, in many times, coaching can become short-term. It's based on meeting a particular goal, and it can be short-term. It involves, in other words, you cannot coach forever, but you can mentor forever. It involves improving the self-awareness and productivity of an individual. It also involves guiding the individual and seeking to find and amplify inner motivation. So there are many questions that you would ask that individual, the coachee, in a way that will help them find themselves, their inner self and their inner motivation, more than you would do in a particular area in coaching. It can also deepen self-learning. It deepens self-learning and also helps the individual move forward. Similar to all the others, all these aspects help an individual move forward. It creates accountability. There's great accountability when it comes to coaching. It also helps the individual to come up with answers for what they are doing. So the answers don't come from the coach, no. They just bring a way of you being able to answer your own situations. And coaching can address the whole spectrum of life. And it also helps in considering the individual's capabilities and uniqueness. So you go into coaching thinking of, these are your capabilities. These are your unique natures. How do we push that to a higher level? So when you're thinking of mentorship, we think of motivation, inspiration, and challenging. In coaching, many times one would pick a coach for various reasons. They might be thinking of a coach who will be able to help me in my career. growth, or would be able to help me with my financial growth, or personal, or health, or family, or relationship kind of development, or social life, or even attitudes. So you'll find that in coaching, one can have different coaches, more than one coach, in the same way that you can have more than one mentor. But the coach that you will choose will be particular to what you need to be enhanced at a particular period of time. So I want to give you an assignment. There are quite a number of articles that we will share with you in the common website that we are using. And we will encourage you to read those articles, but more specifically to the area of supervision, mentorship, and coaching. We want you to compare and contrast the difference between supervision, mentorship, and coaching, and provide scenarios in each of the phenomena. When you talk about supervision, for example, what can you give as an example of a supervision kind of approach in the research context? What can you give as an example of a mentorship approach that was used in a research context? And equally so, how do you relate that to coaching? So that's your assignment number one. So I want to go to the last session, which is on effective communication in research management. Again, as I mentioned, this is high level. The reason we touched on these two aspects of mentorship, supervision, coaching, and also communication is because they come in very handy when you talk about research leadership. So why effective communication? Effective communication is necessary because it is the cornerstone of successful research management. That's in the line of research management. So what does it facilitate? When you have effective communication, especially in the area of research management, it helps you to clearly articulate what the research objectives or even project objectives and expectations are to your team and to the funder and to anyone else who was interested in finding out what this research is all about. Number two, it helps or it facilitates collaboration and teamwork. When you're effective in communication, your collaboration and teamwork also is enhanced. It helps you to deal with risk management. It also helps you and facilitates decision-making processes. It facilitates your stakeholders' engagement and also in your management of expectations. As my second assignment to you, based on what will be availed to you, kindly read the articles that we will have put in the portal that touch on communication. And any other relevant article, you could search for relevant articles and also look at them in terms of communication and describe the various forms of communication that are used. Secondly, discuss the factors that inhibit effective communication in research management. And thirdly, elaborate on the strategies needed for effective communication in research. So having said that, the readings we have provided are actually what will be in the portal. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Flora. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Flora, for such an elaborate presentation. I've learned quite a lot in terms of research and leadership, and I've noted a couple of things from you, and it explains why you're such a good leader. So due to the interest of it, let me just ask Hesbon to proceed, then we shall ask questions after Hesbon's presentation. Professor Hesbon, please. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you, Flora. I'm going to ask participants wherever they are, and I'm going to trust you to do what I'll ask you to do. I'm kindly requesting you all to stand up and stretch for about 60 seconds, and then we will start. So please, wherever you are, just stand up the way I'm doing. I hope you can see me. And then just stretch. You can touch down. Okay. So I hope, Diana, you've given me the right to be able to share my screen.
Yes, yes. Please try and share.
Okay. Is it visible?
Yes, we can see.
All right, thank you. All right, good morning. You can take your seat now, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Hesbon Wow, and I'm also part of APHRC team. We work together with Dr. Karimi, as well as Diana and others in the call, in this webinar. So what Flora has shared is high level, and it is our attempt to cover research management and leadership. I want to emphasize what she said earlier, that we are not able to do justice to this topic in 2 or 3 hours. We are trying to do our best, and our best is what she has done and what I'm going to do. But in addition to that, we are also going to share with you lots of materials. So we trust that you will make use of those materials to cover what we could have covered because of limited time. So with that, I would like to go to what I have. My session will go deeper into what is involved in creating a thriving research environment. Flora talked about what the institutions are supposed to do, and she mentioned structures, procedures, policies, guidelines, many things. But now I'm zeroing on thriving research environment, which is very critical. And you as a researcher or as an individual working in an institution, you have a role, the institution has a role, and that is what we are going to cover briefly in this session. So my goal is that you will be able to describe a thriving research environment, and you'll talk about why it is important. And part of that environment is the ability to form an effective team and lead that team. Flora mentioned on a high level about leadership. So we'll touch on that. And we just gave an example of a research team. How can you form one and how can you lead it? Then we will talk about what are some of the things that institutions can do in terms of supporting the development of that thriving research environment that we are talking about. And then in doing this, there are challenges that come with it. And so we are going to briefly discuss some of those challenges that are associated with creating a research environment, as well as how to sustain that thriving environment. So that is what I would like us to cover. As Flora and I have said, there are other sessions that we could cover, but we are going to share them as additional material, something deeper on research leadership. We'll go much deeper in research governance, GFGP, which stands for Good Financial Grant Practices, which is a governance tool. Flora talked about governance a lot. And so that is a tool that is out there, and it is very important that you get to learn about it. So there's a session, some materials on that. We'll also share with you some materials on budgeting. Budgeting is key. How do we do it, and how do we manage the risk and ensure sustainability of research projects? And then finally, grant and partnership management. How do we manage grants? And of course, when we collaborate or partner with others, how do we manage all that and ensure that we are successful in that project? And then closing out, how do we close a project in such a way that it just ended abruptly? So those are some sessions that we could have covered, but because of limited time, we are only going to share the materials. And of course, there are several handouts there, which you will be able to make good use of. So I trust that you will do your part, and we are doing our part. So what are the features of a thriving research environment? When we say it's a thriving research environment, one feature is that you as a researcher or as an individual, you have autonomy, you have ownership of your project. You have a say, you direct what will happen and what the limits, the boundaries, you have that level of autonomy. Without it, we cannot talk of a thriving research environment. You have resources at your disposal, and Flora hinted or mentioned some of those resources. Do you have them for you to be able to carry out the research? And so there are all sorts of resources that we'll talk about, but that is an aspect or a feature that is important. Funding is very, very important. We can't talk of a research environment that is thriving and we are struggling in terms of funding. So there has to be a mechanism in place to support grant funding. And I think Flora emphasized on that. I'm just saying it again. We need diversity of researchers. We are not going to work alone, but even as we work with others, we encourage diversity. Diversity in terms of research area or expertise, diversity in terms of different backgrounds, anthropologists, statisticians, economists. All aspects of diversity is very, very critical. And without that, we cannot talk of a thriving research environment. We need to network with others. We are not going to talk of a thriving research environment if we are working in silos. So if we are able to network, then that is a very, very important aspect. And even as we continue engaging in research, we don't stop learning. We encourage lifelong learning, new ideas, new innovations, new ways of doing things. And so even as you continue in your research career, and in this case, most of you are in mental health, you need to have capacity strengthening as an aspect, which is emphasized in your research environment. Without that, we will be assuming that you know it all and you will just continue operating, and that is not going to be a thriving research environment. Even as we continue engaging in research, we need to think about those who are going to replace us. So Flora mentioned early career researchers, those who are joining, interns. We need to have an environment that encourages nurturing of those young researchers. Because today, we are the researchers, tomorrow, we are not there. And so who is going to carry on with the work? So an environment that nurtures young researchers, key for a thriving research environment. And then finally, I talked of collaboration, networking. It is very, very important aspect. So these are some features that we encourage that we have in place if we are serious about having a thriving research or creating a thriving research environment. So they are just summarized here. Some of those aspects, Flora touched on them, but here is just a summary of those elements. So we need to collaborate, we need to mentor. Flora just talked about mentorship and supervision and coaching. Those are very important. Diversity, even in terms of discipline, interdisciplinary, there's need for professional development, performance review. This one I didn't touch on. It is important that we keep evaluating how we are doing. So if without evaluation, you will think that you are great or you are performing poorly, and maybe you are doing okay, but you need that performance review and feedback to be able to tell how you are progressing. Flora talked about research intelligence, a mechanism through which we are able to even gather information about opportunities, things like that. Very, very important. Strong publication. We can't claim that we have a thriving research environment and we are not producing. And our productions may be in form of journal articles, policy briefs, and many other products. So we need that. And I talked of funding, which is very, very important. So those elements or features are very important, and it is upon us to create that kind of environment. Now, why do we make so much noise about this environment, about this thriving research environment? Yeah, because if we can explicitly plan and jointly do so, mentor, mentee, or with your advisor or supervisor, if we do that, then the researchers will be more productive, they will be satisfied with their work, and they will be able to contribute to that kind of environment. So that's why it is important. If we can actively plan our career, if I join an institution, I'm able to communicate with my supervisor. I can communicate what my career goals are 5 years from now, what I want to do. I can see a clear path. If that is visible to me as an individual in that setting, in that institution, then I will be more engaged. I will feel satisfied. I will not be looking for a job again every 1 year or something like that, because I will have that level of satisfaction. I will be able to take advantage of the resources that are available. And in that case, I will be contributing to the thriving research environment. If I'm in an environment where I can receive information about different opportunities, career opportunities, that is good. And I'll give an example of APHRC. At APHRC, we share even career opportunities. If there is a job advert about research scientists, and we feel that some of our colleagues are a good fit, we share that. And it doesn't, it's not a big deal. We encourage our researchers to apply, and if some of them do and they go for it, it is a good thing, because we don't want to act like you can only thrive when you are with us. And by the way, when you go somewhere else, according to us, you are going with part of us is going with you. In other words, you are our ambassador there. The good thing that those people saw in you, we contributed to it, and that is a good name. And so, according to APHRC, we believe that we are we are replicating ourselves through the people that we train, the people that we work with. So that is an environment that we are trying to create, which I think is the thriving research environment we are talking about. So researchers working collaboratively and not in isolation is encouraged, because that is the only way we can be productive. And I can't emphasize that any further. So how do we form an effective research team? Because forming that team is part of creating that environment, that thriving environment. So when we talk of teams, teams are made up of individuals. So we start with the individual. Without an individual, we will not be talking of a team. So the first and very, very important thing to consider is identify the right people. Right people in terms of what? In terms of their skills, in terms of their knowledge. Again, Flora talked about this at length. identify people who can perform the task that you want them to perform in terms of their knowledge, in terms of their skills, attitude, personality. Those aspects are very important. Can they adapt to the institution's culture? One of our aspects of APHRC culture is that we want you to speak up. When things are not going the right way, you should not keep quiet. Talk about it so that it can be addressed. Now, the person joining, is that person the kind of person who can speak up, or will they be just quiet and saying, me, who am I? I'm just a research officer, and those are research scientists? No. Can this person, whatever they are bringing, is it going to be complementary, or is it going to duplicate what other skills we already have? If it is a duplication, then no. We want somebody who can bring something that can complement what we have. So identifying the right people is very, very important. And I think that is clear. Then, related to that, let's leverage the strength of this individual. So there are people who are, I would say, for example, extroverts. We need an introvert so that they can be able to help one another. But if you bring people who are just introverts and they populate your institution or your team, then you can see that you will be having a problem. So that speaks to the leveraging of what somebody has and what somebody is lacking. That complementarity is very, very important, because it helps channel is very, very important. The third aspect is invest in skill building. There's continued professional development. It is very, very important. We can't claim that we have known it. Even if you have PhD in an area, there's still a lot to learn. And you may have very high-level skills in that area, but somebody, as a result of maybe participating in some short course, you will be able to diversify, or even to have a different way of implementing maybe a program based on what you are acquiring from that kind of capacity strengthening. So skills building is very, very important. And of course, mentorship, especially for early career researchers. So that is very, very important when we are forming a team. It is important that we have measures in place to ensure that there will be skill building. And of course, we encourage collaboration. So in your team, make sure that that is considered, because without collaboration, we may end up competing, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And we don't want that. You can't go far if you are going to compete. You will no longer be considered a team. It's just a conglomeration of people, which is not what we want. Now, how do we lead an effective research team? Now, Flora said we lead from the bottom. Now, unfortunately, I can't hear. I think I am just trying to make sure that we are awake. So we lead from the front. And these are some things that we consider as a leader. You should encourage your members to share information. It is all about sharing information. What you can do, what you are tasked to do, and what somebody is going to add to it. If somebody is going to rely on your delivery, what you are going to deliver so that they can take it and move to the next step. All that requires information sharing and timely doing so, doing it in a timely manner. And another thing, as a leader, you have to make every member of your team understand that each and everyone's ideas are valued. So it is not going to be valued just by saying that we value your views. People are very, very keen on how you treat them, what you say. When they make a mistake, how do you respond? When all those things that we do, we really communicate to somebody that you value their input. Do you create an environment whereby they feel comfortable making mistakes because they know that this will not be used against them, but if it is used, then it is used in a positive way to help them grow? Because without that, people will not be free to attend. They don't want to make mistakes because it will backfire on them. So very, very important. Flora talked about directives. Give clear communication. If you are giving directive, make it very clear so that people, with the instructions that you've given them as the leader of that team, they know what to do. Some of us have been in a situation whereby you are part of a team, there is a meeting, the meeting has ended, you don't know what you are tasked with. You don't know. You call somebody, you call a member of the team on the side. So what am I supposed to do? You see, that reflects negatively on the leader. From the meeting, it is supposed to be clear what Hesbon is going to do, what Jen is going to do, what Philip is going to do. Otherwise, that time was not well used, or it was wasted if we don't know our roles or the action items. We don't know who is going to do what. In any team, there will be problems. So if we have to solve the problem, we have to own it and it be jointly. And so if you delegate somebody with some task, make sure that it is clear what this person is tasked with. Be open with members and spoken feelings. Sometimes people don't communicate verbally, but you can see from their face that they are confused, that you are, they are expecting better or something more. So read, as a leader, you should be keen on nonverbal communication, what the members of the team are communicating nonverbal. And so without that, you may be able to miss on very, very important aspects expected of a leader for you to be able to have an effective research team. So I'll now transition to more of the support that we should expect. What are some of those resources that Flora hinted if you are in an environment or an institution? So an institution could be a university, it could be a research institution, some NGO somewhere, but what brings us here is mental health. So in your respective settings, what are we expecting, or what should be in place? So I'll delve deeper into that. And most of my examples here may relate more to an academic institution, but you can also try to contextualize it depending on your setting. So one important thing is there is need for supporting research and enterprise development. And what this means, the institution, now if this is an academic institution, it should support linkages with industry, with businesses, with external entities, so that you are not just going to be operating in isolation as an institution. You do not exist in a vacuum. You are part of a system, and other players in the system could be the industry, could be the social enterprise, businesses. So make sure that the institution is supporting that kind of thing, supporting funding opportunities, bringing those fundings, and encouraging you to be able to apply. The institution is supporting interdisciplinary research. I think I've talked about that. So that whole aspect is very, very important. And tied to that is the financial support. The institution should be able to have a sound procurement system, because when you are engaged in a research project, there will be resources that you will need. You need to procure. So do you have that in place? There should be clear and understandable and reliable financial reporting system. So without that, we may be doubted even by the funders, because they don't know, they can't trace how money or how funds are flowing. Very, very important. And of course, we talked about intelligence gathering. Flora gave a very good example of what we have at APHRC. We have a unit that really looks for those opportunities and channel them accordingly to the different units or teams, so that now it is just upon the researchers to put together proposals in response to those RFPs. So that should be in place to be able to speak to, rather to strengthen our financial standing. Another important resource is the information technology. So information technology, what comes to my mind, do we have high-performing computers, high-speed internet, reliable? Do we have those portals that can facilitate collaboration if we are engaged in, if we are partnering with another institution or other institutions, a consortium? Are we able to share resources easily? We have that mechanism in place, a data management system, all that speaks to IT, which is very, very important. And even the IT staff, their availability to support in case of any challenges. Another aspect is the quality assurance, because we want to make sure that finally, not just what we do in terms of responsible conduct of research, but finally what goes out. So the whole process, and it begins with making sure that maybe you have an internal mechanism, for example, an internal institutional review board that makes sure that the work that you are going to engage in is rigorous, is you've considered all those ethical issues, ethical conduct of research. All that is very, very important. There's a research governance framework to your institutions. So all that, if it is there, then it speaks to the quality of the research that you are going to do. So very, very important, regardless of where you are. This, I think, speaks to all the different institutions that are represented here. Then it is also very, very important that the principal investigator, when we write grant, there will be different roles, but there's this person or people, we refer to them as the principal investigator. They have a lion's share of responsibility. So it is important that we conduct skills training or professional development for our team, the people that are going to be working on that project. And this, the person who is responsible for making sure that this happens is the PI. But is the PI supported for this to happen? So it is very, very important that that aspect is considered for development and support of the team that will be rolling out that research project. And then it is also important for the human resources. Again, these are related. The people who are going to support the PI. The PI may be just charging just 10% of his or her time, but the remaining percentage is to be done by the different members of the research team. So are we able to get that team and assemble it? Sometimes in some institutions, it is good when you are applying for the grant. And then when you get it, now it's another problem. How do we now implement? We've gotten this 3 million USD worth of grant. Now, how do we implement this? The people are no longer there. They left the institution. How are we organized in such a way that we are able to bring on board the staff that we need for this work to be carried out? That may not be the case, and it is important that that should be in place. Otherwise, the project may stall. You have the money, and you are not going to burn the money. Many institutions struggle with burn rate. We have the resources, we've gotten the funding, but now we can't implement because those people who are supposed to do the work, they're not there. The recruitment process is taking forever. So those are things that are very, very important, and the institution needs to think about them and make sure that measures are in place to safeguard against that. Library. When we talk of library in the past, this meant really books, study rooms, some physical infrastructure, but it may go beyond that. It may be nowadays we subscribe to different maybe journals or databases. So do we have that in place? We talk of software that are used. Do we have those in place at our institution? Because these are the tools that we use. We should have them in our toolbox if we claim to be engaging in research and we are trying to create a thriving research environment, then this should be considered. Facilities management and infrastructure. So things like what I was talking about, the equipment and technical support, and even beyond that, the ability to get access to the global research networks. So you have that mechanism in place to support that. That is very, very important because it speaks to the thriving research environment that we are emphasizing here. There are also some other social dimensions that are also important to consider. As an institution, do you organize research conference? Do you do journal clubs, brown bags, and those opportunities? Because these are the ways through which we can strengthen the capacity of researchers and even people who work with researchers so that our research products can be of high quality and can have the potential to impact. Now, in our case, to impact health, mental health. Do we have poster days? Do we have research forum? Do we do some newsletter? Those are important. Do we have an alumni network? You know, people, if it is if we are running, let's say, a fellowship program, do we have a way through which our fellows are connected and we can leverage whenever we need? Let's say we are running a fellowship program focusing on implementation research. Are we able to connect to these fellows so that sometimes when we want to even do a short course, we can easily pull them and they will run with it? Those are important because they contribute to the thriving research environment that is key. Do we have a learning and teaching center? It would be in form of, research conference or short courses and the like. Do we create such opportunities? Do we conduct peer review and promotion of critical thinking, teamwork? Do we do those things? If yes, then yes, we are contributing to the thriving research environment. And finally, I just want to emphasize about supervision and mentorship, which is very, very important. I remember that Flora said that with supervision, it is based on what you are expected by the institution. So if I'm your supervisor, there are certain things that the institution requires that I do. But mentorship goes beyond. So do we encourage supervision and mentorship, or do we just stop at supervision? That is all. And we still expect that we will be able to have, rather to create a thriving research environment. So those are very, very important central support, central in the sense that the institution should take this serious and make sure that they exist. Now, there are challenges, even as we talk about creating a thriving research environment, there are challenges that go with it. And some of these, I can just mention them in passing, but it is important for us to think of how do we address them. Now, one of the challenges is limited resources. Now, limited resources, remember, without funding, we cannot speak of the research projects. So the important thing is, how do we make sure that we have continuous flow of funding? This is a big problem, not just in Kenya, not just in East Africa, but I would say Africa-wide when it comes to funding for research. But it starts with the institution. In fact, it starts with the individual. As an individual researcher, what are you doing? If you realize that you are not able to attract funding, is it because of gaps in skills, in your knowledge or experience? Are you taking advantage of the opportunities that are available so that you can be more competitive as an individual before you talk about as an institution? So those are challenges that we need to think about and address for us to be able to create a thriving research environment. As we aspire to create that, we find ourselves in a situation whereby we are battling between quality and quantity. And an example would be this. We remember we emphasize that we should be producing, so research productivity. And I said it could be journal articles, police brief, and many other products. Now, are we going to be judged based on how many articles I write? Or is it also, are we going to also look at the quality of those articles? Those are very, very important. We should not emphasize on one and de-emphasize the other. It is important to produce more, but even as we produce more, make sure that they are of quality. And maybe just to speak about quality, we want research products that can really change policy, which have policy implications, which can change how we practice, can enhance existing guidelines, things like that. Then that would be of high quality, even if it is not cited a lot, but we can be able to relate to what its impact is. Then, as we aspire for creating a thriving research environment, we will find ourselves also battling with how do we motivate the researchers and even people who work with researchers? How do we retain them? Even supervision and mentorship, how do we do it? It is, in most cases, you find that the way you are supervised is the same way you are likely to supervise others. And maybe there were some things that needed to be corrected. So maybe all it may take is just attending a short course in supervision, research supervision, and then that would make a whole difference. But now we are stuck because we do not have access to that, or we are not willing to attend such kind of courses. So those are some challenges that we are likely to encounter, and we should be cognizant of them so that we address them. How do you balance between individual and institutional success? If the environment encourages competition, we should be careful, because we may find ourselves in a situation whereby you are looking at just you as an individual, you are succeeding, you are producing many papers, or you are producing papers, or articles or publications that have policy implications, but you are just an individual. Now, would you go far as an institution versus having a team that is working in some area, and so it is not so much of an individual, but an institution? If an institution is known for success in some area, that is better than an individual, because an individual, it is very risky. What if this person is no longer there? Then that is the end of that. So that is why it is risky to equate an individual to an institution. So let's have people. That's why I mentioned earlier that it is important to think of early career researchers, those who are going to replace these eminent researchers. Who are you mentoring, so that next time when you are not able to present at a conference, when you are not able to show up at a TV interview, somebody is there to stand in, and still that can continue. If that is the case, then it is good. But if that is not the case, then we need to do something in that environment. Do we invest in our research leaders, the change agents? Are we open to change? In some institutions, we find that there are people who have been there. This is especially common with the universities. And to be specific, public universities, not in a bad way, but I'm just giving an example. You find that there are certain people, they've been there for many years, and if you bring new ideas, they are likely to shut it down. They will frustrate you. You will not go anywhere. And so the institution will not progress. Contrast that with some other institutions that are just coming up. They are open to new ideas. You can make mistakes. We correct you gently, but we encourage you to continue exploring. You see, you are likely to grow. You are likely to advance in that kind of setting. So that is what we encourage. But we are also reminding us that depending on your context, some of these may become very, very big issues, and that may derail us realizing that creative, thriving research environment. Then another very important thing, even as we spoke about funding, it is important as an institution to also be keen on what you really stand for. So we know that when we come across a funding opportunity, we want to go for it because it is mental health related. I'm just giving an example. Now we want to go for it. But even as you go for it, let us also ask ourselves how it is aligned to our mission, to our vision. Because institutions have their vision. For example, APHRC, our vision is impacting lives through research. So impacting lives in Africa through research. How do we do that? So we do that through engaging in research. So we generate research evidence. We are also engaged in capacity strengthening. We are also engaged with the policy actors, all that. So you see, we have our vision and mission. So any research work that we want to engage in, we ask ourselves how, to what extent is it consistent with our mission and our vision and mission? Is it aligned with our with those? And then if that is the case, then it is okay. Sometimes it is even important that we be futuristic. We think something may not be of relevance or importance right now, but we can foresee, again, based on our experience and intelligence, we can foresee that something is going to be. For instance, I'll give you an example. If 20 years ago or 15 years ago, somebody was going for machine learning and things like that, some people may not have thought about it as very, very important, but now all of us, we can really see that that is very, very important. And so if you have that ability to think futuristically, that really can help you even to contribute to the thriving research environment that we all aspire to have. So as I said, I just wanted to go deeper into creating a thriving research environment, which is an important aspect of research, governance and leadership, which is all about what we wanted to cover in this webinar. So I'll stop because I realize that it is important for us also to hear. We were not interactive. It was one way, and we are trying to give room, as Diana said, we want to give room for a few questions and maybe comments so that at least it's not just one-sided. Thank you very much for your attention. I believe I can stop now and invite back to you, Diana.
Thank you, Hesbon, for taking us through how we can have an environment of research that is very is thriving. So right now, I would like the participants to ask questions. You can do this by either raising your hands, then we'll be able to unmute you. And so while we wait, there were a couple of questions in the Q&A. Joel, perhaps if you say somebody has raised their hands, you can alert me. So there's a question from Yvonne Opanga. She's asking, in the context of a multi-country study, how do you better manage the diversity in policies, laws, and regulation to ensure all countries' expectations are met and studies implemented efficiently? I think this goes to you, Flora. Or was it? Or anyone can answer from the panel. In the context of a multi-country study, how do you better manage the diversity in policies, laws, and regulation to ensure all countries' expectations are met and studies implemented efficiently?
Okay, I don't know if Laura is there. But I could attempt to respond.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you know if Laura is there?
Sorry. Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Dana, would you want to comment again?
In the context of a multi-country study, how do you better manage diversity in policies, laws and regulation to ensure all countries' expectations are met and studies implemented efficiently.
Okay, the first thing is that if you decide to do multi, then you have to be aware of the fact that you have to be aware of what is going on in that land. And it's highly possible that even in terms of ethical approvals, you have to get it. The studies that I have been involved in this far, we've had to seek ethical approvals from the different countries. But when it comes to the contractual agreements, it's made with a PI. So the question is, where is the PI coming from? And the laws that will relate to the contractual agreement will relate to the country where the PI or the legal host of the project is. But in a nutshell, the different countries, what are they called? Policies have to be considered. Thank you. I don't know that I've answered the person.
Yvonne, I hope you've been answered. If not, you can raise your hand. Husband, did you want to add any other thing?
Yeah, just to add, this is not in place now, but as APHRC, we are thinking of coming together as a team with the relevant institutions in different countries so that we can be able to make it easier for, let's say, those multi-country studies, to make it easier for the PIs engaged in such kind of studies, so that, let's say, for example, if your proposal, rather your protocol, has been reviewed in one place, then you don't have to go through the same process in 7 other countries. But that is not yet in place. Flora, I think you are privy to that
Yes.
ongoing. Yeah, maybe
Yes,
you can
yes.
add a few.
Yes, but it's not yet in place, so we cannot yet operate in that way. The last study that we were involved in, that was an East African study. The ethical approval took 1 year for one of the countries, which was rating to the team. So maybe as you're thinking of bringing on board different countries, you may need to start the protocol development very early, even as early as right now, so that the moment the project is just approved, immediately, that's not the time you're going to start the protocol. You'll already have it, and you start having discussions now in the different countries to see how you can be able to push this to the next level. In some countries, you'll find that the protocol has to be approved, first of all, by the universities. Like now, let me talk about an institution like Dar es Salaam, University of Dar es Salaam. The protocol approval begins from the university stage. So even bringing on board the institutional heads early enough, or even those who are involved in the protocol approval, will be necessary early enough. So that's one way that you can mitigate against that long period of time of ethical approval, which can be very frustrating when you're doing multi-country. The other way is to look for collaborators. Because you on your own, yes, you have your team, your partners in the different countries, but they may not be able to, they're not the ones who are able to pull the strings in the different countries. Find out who are these strong people who are in the different countries and who are aware of what the policies say in the different countries, who can be able to push you to the right people fast enough, so that then that does not delay you in terms of coming up with the clearances. Thank you. I hope that answers the individual who asked. That should be, was it Opanga? Yvonne?
Yes. Yeah, that should be Yvonne. Yeah, in case you haven't answered your question, Yvonne, please, you can raise your hands and we'll be able to unmute you and elaborate further. We have one person, Yinka. Yinka, I've enabled you to ask your question. Please go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question. Yinka, you there?
Okay, unmute. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for this presentation. although I joined very late, but I met the last speaker talking about the research resources or enabling environment in APHRC. So I'm interested in attending a training. I'll be going for my postdoc. I wish to attend a training this mental health data prize, physical. So I want to ask that in APHRC, is it available to learn data science, mental health, physical, face-to-face course? Thank you. Hello?
All right. Yes, we got your question. I have to find out, we have a number of courses, and in the data science team, I can check for you. I don't have answers ready unless any of my colleagues has the answer ready. Diana can come back to you with whether that is available in person. My understanding is that it is virtual, but let Diana give you a feedback on that. Yinka, I hope you got me.
Yes, I'm waiting for her response.
Yes, that's fine, Ninka. I will put my email on the chat. Then perhaps you can send me a mail on that. Then we'll talk from there. I hope that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And Diana can share this with everyone on this webinar, because maybe others are also asking the same, just so
Okay,
that
fine.
if it is there, then it is for the benefit of everyone.
Then that's fine. I think I'll share with everyone. I have their email addresses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Yinka.
Dana.
Yes.
Sorry, Dana. I'm also seeing another question and Yinka can put down her hand. I am also seeing another question on the chat on participation. This is a professor at the University of Namibia. That should be Raquel, and his participation in the different teams. Maybe you could answer that, but I think it's good that the different teams get to see him as a possible team member. So, because this may not necessarily come from APHRC, this may be something within the teams that are being created. And I want to trust that even as the teams are being created, there is a resource that you can be able to make use of there in terms of professor from Namibia, and consider how you can be able to include him in your different proposals. I don't know that that answers or that gives a way forward with respect to the research teams. Hesbon, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think you've addressed it, Flora. Just to add that when we think of joining a team, think of it both ways: what you bring and what you also stand to gain, and not one way. So find out. It's just like joining another institution. The institution may package herself in such a way that you really feel like you ought to have joined that institution 5 years ago. And now when you enter, you find out that it is far from good, but good from far. So just make sure that, yes, this is what I'm bringing, and this is what I hope I'm getting into. Do necessary inquiry, meetings and the like, so that you are well aligned, the best fit, and then both parties will be happy.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering, and thank you, I'm just smiling because Raquel has told me it's a she, so sorry. In case I referred to you as a he, I'm so sorry for that. I'm also wondering, and maybe this will be from Joel's table, Joel Kuria, there must be I suspect there are some communities of practice or some some WhatsApp groups that have been created of all the possible researchers and the kind of research that is being done. Is that somewhere where Raquel can be able to interact in that community, or how is that community being carried out? Maybe Joel can help us with that.
Okay, thank you very much, Flora. And to answer Raquel, the matchmaking exercise that we did to join up teams is still okay. We completed the phase itself of matchmaking, but interested individuals, we are still linking them up with teams that they are interested in. So Raquel, I'll ask you, maybe you can share your email, and I'll definitely share. You can tell me like what kind of team you're looking for, and then I can try to link you up with some of the already formed teams, and then you can join them. Or if not, you can also join up with, you can look for people from your side and form a team. So there is two ways: either you form a team by yourself and you look to invite others, or you can let us know, maybe you're looking for data scientists or you're looking for mental health experts, like you said, and then we can link you up to the same individuals. Thank you very much. Over to you, Flora.
Just to add something, Joel.
Yes.
I suggest that you share what is available, and then Raquel could then decide that, no, of all this, what I'm really interested in is not there, so let's form this team. But if there's an existing one, let Raquel decide based on that. I think that would be my suggestion. But thank you. Back to you, Flora.
I think I've taken over from Diana. I should have kept quiet initially.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
Okay, but I think Joel can also answer the question on the PI. Must the PI be a PhD holder? Would that be something that you'd want to answer, Joel, or would you want us to slightly comment before you?
Okay.
So go on.
For the readership of the group, the only limitation that we are putting for the PI is that the PI, you can only be a read in only one team. Remember, in these groups, we said that you can actually join more than one group and participate in the application in more than one group, but ensure that you're only read in one. So we are not really going to be the one like putting limitation like you must have a PhD to be a read, because we are actually encouraging young researchers to be part of this. So feel free, even if you don't have a PhD, to definitely send your application as an PI. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know Hesbon may have touched on this. Even as you think of who should be the PI, ensure that the PI is someone who, within the team, you feel is the strongest in this particular proposal, so that then you do not lose out on opportunities based on what you have presented. And there are times when you would discover that the proposal may be leaning so much on the number of publications that you have, or even the amount of engagement that you have had in the area of mental health. So even as you're thinking, try and think of how you can sell yourself with the personnel that you have, so that this proposal may be one of those very strong proposals. I'll give you a scenario that we had, and Hesbon can attest to this. So there's a proposal that we were writing some time ago, and it was touching on epidemiology, applied epidemiology. I am an educationist. I am not I'm not specifically public health, and epidemiology lies in public health. And so I came up with a proposal. I was the lead in the proposal, but at the end of it, because we knew that those who will be examining will be looking at the strength of the team, especially the PI. I had to have Hesbon become the PI in this project. So even as you think of who should become the PI, debate among your team, find out who's the strongest when it comes to what needs to be put out, so that whoever is put out as a PI does not result in lesser, percentages being given or rating when the assessment takes place. That's just a piece of advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Flora. I think also on the Q&A, somebody had touched on that, and I think it has been answered, of what can be done if a team member or a professor does not contribute to a protocol development, but he or she is required just for the title of his or her institution. So I think at this point, you just check on the strength of the PI or the strength of that team member. Okay. Hesbon, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, I know that may not be pleasant to some ears, because one may claim I'm the one who's been writing this proposal, and Flora just wants to now be the PI. So we have to be strategic. Ask yourself, without Flora, because of her publications and all that, we are going to get this. We stand a chance of being successful. Now, without her, then we are not. So which one which way should we go? Would we rather get something and then now because at least it will give you an opportunity. You are part of this. You can now cite it next time. You will list it as one of the grants that you've been part of. Maybe you are now a co-investigator, as opposed to that opportunity went. So for some of us, it may be, that is how the business is. We have to grow slowly, and sometimes we may feel like it is unfair, but in the long run, we are somewhere instead of getting stuck and we are just stagnant. So piece of advice, which may not be very palatable, sweet, but may become sweeter later.
Yeah, and also as Hesbon has said, as you're thinking of the PI, and maybe you have someone who's more senior, you could also consider a core PI kind of situation, whereby you come in as the direct, at an equal, more or less equal level in terms of being a core PI. So you don't have to only have a PI, you can become a core PI, so that then you're working towards improving the whole project together.
Thank you, Dr. Flora. There's a question. Someone wants to know if we will do the same courses in French. I think the team is exploring this issue to see whether we can have it translated to French. Joel, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, thank you. So for now, we have most of our materials in English, and all the presentations have been done in English. And I know we have members who are from the different part of Africa, that is Arabic, French, Portuguese. And what we can do is that at the moment, we don't have the translations ready for all the courses, but we are working towards if we can be able to implement this. So definitely this will be communicated when the materials are ready.
Thank you, Joel. Somebody on Flora, you'd like to comment on that?
Sorry, I just went back to the question of the PI, and I just wanted to say to the team that is considering this, yes, you're talking about someone who will give you the title in the institution. It would be good that even as the person considers being the person who's put in the proposal, that the individual reviews the document. Reviewing is also critical, because as scientists, it is important that even as you become PIs, then you own what has been put down. And for any PI, I mean, they are aware of the fact that if they don't agree with something in the document, it is up to them to correct it early enough because the ownership will be theirs. So it is their responsibility to ensure that they also review. They may not have come in any other process, but they review to make sure that they own the document. Otherwise, it can be an embarrassment for them as individuals. Thank you.
And it is unethical also to just put your name and you never touched that protocol.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a question on the chat as well. Please, will you share with us the PPT? Yes, we'll put them on the MHDP platform. So we will share the link on the chat so that you can able to access it. And if anyone also, before I close on anyone, if at all you have any question, please feel free to raise your hand. We shall unmute you and enable you to ask your question. I think we've explored all the questions on the Q&A and on the chat for now. Okay, there is David Agala. I've enabled you. Please unmute.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for this enlightenment session. So my question is just an appeal, because I actually joined even the group late. I got to know about it very late. So please, I would like to get maybe a link of how one can follow up through for someone that's just joining, and then even for the group, so that somebody can just follow up and catch up with time. Yes. So I don't know how that is can make that possible. Thank you.
Joel, would you like to answer that?
Sure. So I will share a link to some of the already taught courses, our YouTube channel, and I'll also share the website. You can be able actually to read about the whole project. Even the application guidelines are already there. So most of the materials are already out. So kindly check out the links that I'm putting in the chat. And if you have questions, feel free even to reach out through the provided email. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. I hope we've answered your question, David. Okay, I cannot see any other hands raised, and I cannot see any question on the chat and Q&A. So perhaps maybe I can.
Sorry, Diana. Diana,
Yes,
just a quick one, and maybe I'm sending this to Joel. Is everyone able to access the portal? From what I heard from David, it's more like he's just heard of this just now. So how would he know how to access it? I'm not very sure. Is that something that would be shared?
So sorry, I mean the material, the capacity building program itself is set in like more of like a website form. So when they go there, they're even able to create an account. They can register. It's still open, and they can access different courses. Let me put the right now on the chat there.
Yeah, thank you.
So you can be able to see all the courses which have been divided into 5 groups. That is data science, mental health, evidence-based policy decision making, like the course we are having today, artificial intelligence and causal inference, and then we have advanced statistics methods. So we've divided those courses, or some have not already been done, so they are upcoming, and some have already been done. And we also have our YouTube channel, which I just also put a link on it, on all the webinars that have been done, apart from just the training, but including other webinars where we have invited speakers to speak on maybe special topics and such. So for him to access, he just need to have that link, and then he can actually create their account. he can read about us. We have the FAQ page where he can see some of the common asked questions. And he can also share even his mobile number. We can add him on some of our social platform like WhatsApp, and we also have Slack. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joel. I hope
Thank you,
that is clear. If it's not clear, please feel free to reach out. We'll be able to advise further. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, David. I'm just perusing. Are there going to be any more networking, matchmaking events? That's from Bianca. Joel, would you like to take that?
Sorry, come up.
Are there going to be any more networking or matchmaking events?
Okay, we will not have the matchmaking webinars themselves like we did last time. But what we have is like you can send a request, because we already did like the matchmaking for all the African countries. And we were doing them based on like what kind of, okay, we all want to work on mental health data. But maybe you want to work with a team in Uganda, you want to work with a team in Morocco, you want to work a team in Kenya. So some teams have already been formed, and which actually we let the participants themselves form their own team. We did not put people in teams. So it's up to you check like, okay, I have this qualification, I'm looking for some mental health experts and people who are maybe working in Kenya. And so you are looking for mental health experts working in Kenya data, and so you come to support them. So you kind of request to join the team, and the logistics on how you form the team will be upon you. So we are not really like forcing people to be part of this team or like that. But what we do is we are trying to allow you to have an avenue to know these individuals who are already there. Okay, so we had some forms we have filled with most of the participants of this data prize, and where we asked them their interest, what kind of data they're working on, what part of mental health they want to work on. Is it depression? Is it anxiety? Is it psychosis? And then from this survey, we are able, when we get requests from individual, they don't have a team, we are able to know the kind of people we can refer them to. So I hope I answer your question. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to type in the email there, and you can feel free to reach out. I'm also going to add the WhatsApp group there. So you can also join the main WhatsApp groups where there's a lot of conversations ongoing. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Joel, for that. I can see there's no other question on the chat. I can give one last chance to anyone with a burning question. Anyone would like to, with a question? Oh, okay, fine. So at this juncture, I'd like maybe to give the panelists to give us any closing remarks before we close the session. Yes, I can see Flora. Dr. Flora, please go.
I just want to thank each of the participants, and we wish you all the best in the process of coming up with your projects. And just to emphasize the fact that research management is really key, and governance is really key in the success of your project. For you to be effective, to be efficient, and to win the trust of different players, you really need to ensure that the whole process is governed in a very great manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Flora. Hesbon?
Okay, thank you, Diana, and thank you everyone, those who created time to participate in this webinar. Mental health is very, very important, and I'm happy that everyone on this webinar is interested in that area, because for quite some time we've not given it enough attention. And in whatever capacity you are contributing to the work around mental health, I strongly encourage you to take it serious as an individual and also as an institution. So we are here in different capacities. Some of us are representing some institutions in different capacities. So whatever role you play, as Flora said, research management and leadership is key for Africa to be able to contribute competitively in the global arena. We need to do our part as individuals and also our part as institutions. Let us be problem solvers and not people who just complain about issues. Whatever little contribution we make, put together, it can move Africa an inch, and which is important as opposed to just talking about the problem and not attempting to solve it. So thank you, and let's move together slowly. Back to you.
Thank you, Professor Hesbon. So I'd like to remind everyone that there's so many materials that will be shared, and also there were some assignments that were given out. Please remember that this course normally takes 5 days, so there's a lot that wasn't covered in depth. So you can go through the materials to learn more. So it will be shared on the site that Joel has shared on the chat. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining this webinar. Thank you for participating. I hope you've learned a lot. And without any further ado, I'd like to close the session. So thank you, everyone, and have a lovely weekend ahead. See you for next session.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.